Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 200 of the Medieval Podcast. I'm Danièle Cybulski, also known as the 5-Minute Medievalist. Yes, it's 200 episodes today. I can't believe it. It's been 4 years, 200 episodes. That is a lot of episodes and so many great guests and so much great history. It is just such a privilege to be celebrating 200 episodes today. So in celebration, I'm going to be telling you the results of the survey I sent out last week that determined whose episodes were the best in a whole bunch of different categories. So stay tuned after the break to find out who had the most surprising, the most uplifting, the most entertaining episodes over the last 4 years. All of that is coming up right after this. So for the 200th episode of a history podcast, it seems appropriate to look back over the last 4 years and just think about what's happened in the world, in our lives over these past 4 years. It has been an absolutely wild ride. For those of you who actually went through the survey and actually looked at the last 200 episodes, you'll see just so much history unfolding. And that's just in the small corner of the world that is medieval studies. So you'll remember that in 2019, there was a fire at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, for example, that's still being built. It's hopefully going to be finished by the 2024 Olympics in Paris, but that's still being rebuilt. Remember what a devastating day that was? Wow, that was 2019. We also went through together as a society thinking really carefully through how we deal with problems when the Black Lives Matter really came to the forefront of everyone's consciousness. It's always been there, an issue for people to grapple with. And it's still, of course, something that we are grappling with as a society. But that is something that came to the fore as well over the course of these last 4 years. Of course, COVID-19 made a huge impact on us. Remember when we were thinking about it in the early days of COVID-19, and I had Winston Black on to tell us about this compared to the Black Death. Do you remember those days? Whoa, it feels like a long time ago, and yet not all that long ago. The beginning of 2020, when we had this idea that 2020 was going to be a great year, it's going to be our year. And well, that was some year that we went through together. And all of these things changed how we did things. So, for example, every year Peter and I will go over what happens at Kalamazoo, and some of those were virtual conferences. I think that sometimes we don't realize the amount of stuff that we've been through over the last 4 years until we have a milestone like 200 episodes to look back. Over the past 4 years, so I started this in January of 2019, I have made well over 100 new historian friends through social media, through the podcast, through conferences because of the podcast. And that's been just awesome. On the other hand, I did lose one friend, a colleague of mine, Alicia McKenzie, who we lost, well, it feels fairly recently. And she was one of the guests on the podcast, somebody that I was able to call sort of at the last minute and say, can you come and be on it? And she was so gracious and such a lovely person. So, I mean, I think we can all sort of count the years through the friends we've made and even the friends we've lost too. Some of my friends who were not friends of mine before I started the podcast have now been on the podcast more than once because they have had more than one book come out over this time. Sometimes people have had 2 books come out, sometimes more. People like Dan Jones and Michael Livingston, just amazing writers who just keep churning out the books. I'm always in awe of their work. Then we have friends, guests of the podcast making new content on TV, on streaming services, on TikTok. We've seen the rise and the decline and fall of Twitter as a place where a lot of medievalists were hanging out and talking. We still haven't really found another home for medieval studies that was like Twitter. Even though Twitter is still around and I'm still there, it really has changed over the last 4 years. We've seen good movies come out. We've seen bad movies come out. We have lived to see a Dungeons and Dragons movie have wide appeal and become a blockbuster, which is something that I think many of us who came up through the 70s, 80s, and 90s did not expect to ever happen, but it's happened now. We've had new video games come out. Some of them have had extensive consultation with medievalists like Age of Empires and Pentiment. So these have all come out in the last 4 years as well. I think there has been a shift in the public consciousness around medieval studies and the way it's talked about in media and in social media. I personally think that people are starting to be a little bit more careful with how we paint this period because we've had so many stellar medievalists just get out there and contribute to the discussion in the public media. And I think that is so awesome and something that is a change that is worth celebrating. So, for example, you have fewer people thinking that medieval people believe the earth is flat. And I think that is major change because that is something that we thought was going to be an uphill battle forever. So I think there's a lot of good changes happening in the public consciousness right now. Another major change that is related to this is that being a medievalist is cooler than it's ever been since maybe the Victorian period when Victorians were walking around spouting off some Tennyson or something. It's a really cool time to be a medievalist. People seem to like what we're doing. They seem to dig what we're doing. They seem to enjoy the things that we do that could have been thought of as weird not too long ago, things like experimental archaeology. So these things have really changed over the last 4 years. And I don't know if this podcast has had anything to do with these changes, but if it has, then I'm super grateful. Speaking of gratitude, my life has changed in fundamental and major ways over the last 4 years. Some have been awesome, some have been not so awesome. But one thing that hasn't changed is the gratitude that I feel to have this career, to be able to share medieval studies with you each week, to have such generous colleagues that will come on the show and tell everyone about their research. It's just such a privilege to do this, to be part of your lives every week. And I'm just so grateful to have the opportunity. And the more I think about it, the more I think that 200 episodes is really a testament to that friendship that we have built, you and me and my guests, and the kinship that we have in our interest in the medieval studies and in our investment in making sure that good history, solid history, good research gets out there, gets studied, gets shared. So I'm so grateful that you're here. And I'm just so pleased that you're still here after all these episodes, after all the work that I've done over the course of my career. I'm just so happy that you're here. I do say this a lot, and I know I do, but that's because I think if you can have such an awesome career that makes you so happy, that can make some positive change in the world, I mean, how can you not be grateful for that? So thank you for being part of the ride. And without further ado, let's get into your votes for some of the best episodes of the Medieval Podcast. So I'm going to start with the category, the most surprising. And one of the things that was perhaps most surprising about this whole process, this whole survey process, is when I listed those 200 episodes, I had dozens of answers come in. So dozens of people replied to the survey. And in every category, there was a major tie. So many people were interested in so many different episodes. And to me, that really speaks to the fact that when you're interested in medieval studies, you're interested in a whole range of things, and you're always willing to be surprised, and you're always willing to learn new things. But in this category, most surprising, it's probably not surprising that there was a clear winner. And the clear winner was Medieval Eels with John Wyatt Greenlee. And I'm so happy to have this be the first award of the day because when it came to 100 episodes, I sent out an email to, I thought, all of my guests from the first 100 episodes and asked them if they wanted to send in a soundbite for the 100th episode. And somehow I missed John Wyatt and I felt so terrible about it because John Wyatt's episode was just so wonderful and everyone enjoyed it so much that I felt that about that for years. So I'm so happy that John Wyatt Greenlee gets our first award of the day, which is the most surprising episode. It's also very apt because John Wyatt's handle on Twitter is Surprised Eel Historian because, as he said on the episode, he was surprised to have become an eel historian. But I think we're all super grateful that he has become an eel historian and his research has spread far and wide. And I remember learning so much about eels, not only from his work on Twitter, but when he came on the episode, telling us things about how they were transported and how people pay their rent in eels and how you could eat eels on the street, barbecued on a stick, or you could have them in a bowl, and how you try and get them home fresh later. Like, this stuff is so interesting and something that you don't necessarily find everywhere else. So this award for most surprising goes to John Wyatt Greenlee for his work on medieval eels. So congratulations, John Wyatt. I'm so happy in episode 200 to have rectified the problem of episode 100. Congratulations to John Wyatt for the most surprising episode. Speaking of surprising, the next category is most entertaining, and the one that won this only won by 1 vote. But it still surprised me, and that is because it was a solo episode that I did called Fun Facts About Monks. So the episode that won for most entertaining by 1 single vote was Fun Facts About Monks. And this brought my attention to the fact that all of these episodes, I don't know if you know this, all of them are based on my gut instinct. So I just look at the most recent research, the most interesting things I can find, and if I think it's interesting, I put it on the show. So when I look at how many different answers we have, and when I look at something like an episode called Fun Facts About Monks, I think that really validates the fact that we're all interested in these small little facts that are fun and interesting, and that you can build history, you can build a career on that gut instinct. What is interesting? You don't have to structure it on a specific way of doing things, a linear way of doing things, anything like that. You can actually fly by the seat of your pants, and sometimes it'll turn out okay. So the most entertaining episode, apparently, was just me by myself talking about fun facts about monks. And I'm so glad that you enjoyed that, because even though monks are serious, there are so many funny things that you can find when you're looking into monks. And I was so happy to bring that episode across, because I enjoy those little facts that are silly and memorable, and that you can just drop in a conversation sometime and really surprise everyone sitting around the dinner table. So the most entertaining award goes to the episode Fun Facts About Monks. Next, we have the category Most Uplifting. And I came up with this category because when I get emails from people, they tend to say to me that they find the podcast uplifting. And that is so gratifying to me, because I feel as if there's so much out there in the news or just generally in the world that can bring you down. I really wanted to put out something that was uplifting. So I'm so glad that you find the podcast to be a happy spot in your week. And so I put together the category Most Uplifting to find out, what did you find uplifting? And I gotta say, you surprised me again, because a couple of these, we have a 4-way tie, if you can believe it. A couple of these are about warfare. So in this 4-way tie, we have Cannons and Gunpowder with Cliff Rogers as one of the most uplifting. And I really enjoyed talking to Cliff Rogers. As you heard on the episode, he's just so knowledgeable, and he has great sense of humor. And really, I learn so much every time Cliff opens his mouth. So I'm really glad he's at the top of a category. Most Uplifting is not the one I thought we were going to be seeing him at the top of, but I'm really happy to see him there. After that, we have Women in the Crusades with Helen J. Nicholson. Again, I wouldn't have thought necessarily, looking at the title, that Crusades would be uplifting, but Helen Nicholson is just, again, so knowledgeable and so generous in sharing her knowledge, that this is probably one of the things that people found uplifting about Helen Nicholson is just, she's just an incredible scholar, and she has so much to share. And Women in the Crusades, it's just a really interesting topic. Next in the 4-way tie, we have Islamic Gardens and Landscapes with Dee Dee Fairchild Ruggles. And again, I may not have thought that this would be under Most Uplifting, because it's about gardens, but gardens are things that we have loved for thousands of years, right? We love plants. They are uplifting, so maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. And I'm really glad to see this one at the top of a category as well, because this was one I wasn't sure would fly. But like I said, I go with my gut. I found Islamic Gardens interesting, and so I brought Dee Dee on to talk about it, and I'm really happy to find that this was an episode that you found uplifting. And in fact, this episode made it across several categories, so I'm really happy to know that you enjoyed it. And then the last one in the 4-way tie for most uplifting episode is the episode that I called Danielle's Tale, which was just the story of my many failures as well as successes, something I created to be uplifting, to help you feel like you were not alone on your journey, even if your journey was a little bit rough or unexpected. I wondered if this one was going to be near the top of this category, only because this is the one I got a lot of emails about. And I'm just really grateful to everyone who took the time to write to me and tell me your stories. And I'm glad that this episode was helpful to you. So maybe this one, not super surprising, perhaps because I was hoping that this one would make you feel good, and it seems to have done that. But also, Islamic gardens, crusades, cannons, and gunpowder are the things that you find uplifting. I will have to remember that for later. So the most uplifting, a four-way tie between Cliff Rogers, Helen J. Nicholson, Dee Dee Fairchild Ruggles, and me talking about my own struggles and successes. On this topic, I made a category that was just called Best Solo Episode because, as you know, sometimes it's a really busy time in the academic calendar, or I haven't been on the ball in booking guests, and I do episodes by myself for all sorts of reasons, like that, many practical reasons. But I know that I do several episodes every year that are just by myself, and sometimes they get quite a lot of listens. And that's surprising to me because I thought you were here for the guests. But if you like the solo episodes, I am happy to bring you more. So this was kind of a way of finding out what you like to learn about when you're hearing just me by myself. So the category Best Solo Episode had all the things that I do by myself. There was one winner, and then there were a couple of ties after that. But the winner of the Best Solo Episode was a who's who of English kings. And I think that that is good information to know. And I think it's something that was an important episode, perhaps maybe useful, because it's hard to tell one Henry from another or one Richard from another. And in fact, in the Middle Ages, people would draw manuscripts of their kings that would have certain symbols next to them to help you figure out which king you're looking at. And I think so often when we're trying to remember dates and times and incidents, it can be hard to remember which king we're talking about. So listing them all in a row, I was hoping would be useful to you. And I can see that is something that you found useful, which is very gratifying. And perhaps I'll be able to make more episodes that are similar to help you out. Near the top, we also had a couple of different ones. Arthurian literature. I am happy to see that because I love Arthurian literature and I could talk about it all day. So if you want more of that, I'm happy to bring it. Also, myths about the Middle Ages. And I think those are fun because we always want to know what the real answer is, right? What is correct? And there are so many myths out there. There's a lot to work with. And then up there as well was medieval story time, dogs, because everybody loves dogs. The episode about dogs made it into almost every category, I think, because people just love their dogs. You can see it everywhere. And it was a perfect opportunity, you know, with my new puppy around to think about dogs, and I'm really glad you enjoyed that episode. But at the top, Best Solo Episode was a who's who of English kings. I came up with the category, the episode I tell my friends about, because I think that as medieval nerds, as you are, as I am, there are episodes that we like to listen to that are just super detailed about something that we are super into. But are these the things that we tell our friends about? I had a hunch that there were things that we would tell our friends about, maybe those little bits of trivia that would drop into the conversation at dinner, that maybe were different from the episodes that we found the best, that we liked the best. So I put this category in to see what you had to say. And at the top, it's maybe not too surprising, the episode that had the most listens when we were at 150, Medieval Sexuality with Eleanor Janega. And I absolutely adore Eleanor Janega because I can see the numbers so high on that episode. I know that you tell your friends about this episode and they are listening because they are paying attention to Eleanor Janega and listening to her across channels. I mean, who doesn't love that? She is so awesome and she's got so much great work out there. And I mean, it's an episode about sex, so who could ask for anything more? You got sex, you got Eleanor Janega. You've got a winning combination. So I'm so happy that you are telling your friends about this episode because I'm delighted to have more people listening to Eleanor Janega. The runner-up for this category was really fun and interesting and gratifying as well because it was Episode 1, Medieval Coconuts with Kathleen Kennedy. And I know from looking at this that there are lots of Monty Python fans out there because finding out about coconuts is going to be something that you want to tell your friends whenever they bring up the Holy Grail, I'm sure. And if you listen to that episode, and many of the people who have joined in the 4 years since have gone back and listened to the episodes from the beginning, and I'm super grateful that you've done that. You know, that was a terrible episode in terms of sound quality. I was doing my best, but I had no idea what I was doing. And yet, it just goes to show that the work that Kathleen is doing is so interesting, it can transcend terrible sound quality and time to be something that people are talking about and telling their friends about 4 years later. So big congrats to Kathleen. She is a scholar who is so hardworking and she works on such important and detailed stuff. I'm really happy to know that you're still talking about Kathleen Kennedy and medieval coconuts all these years later. Episode 1. So the episode I tell my friends about, at the very top, we have medieval sexuality with Eleanor Janega, and coming up right behind, medieval coconuts with Kathleen Kennedy. The next category is Best Voice, and I created this category in honor of the wonderful Seb Falk, who came on to talk about medieval science and his book, The Light Ages. And I sat down and edited Seb's episode after recording with him and just thought, this voice is incredible. I can listen to it all day. So Seb, I just admire your voice so much. And you did make it as a runner-up in this category, not quite at the top, but this category was in your honor, Seb. So congratulations. It's an honor just to be nominated. At the top of this category is a tie, as we've seen in many of these categories, between the amazing Eleanor Janega, who has just a great voice, doesn't she? She just has something about the timbre of it is just so great. And also, at the very top, tied with Eleanor, is Helen Castor, who is just an awesome, awesome person. In fact, when I listed a space on the survey for people to say nice things about my guests, somebody said there is no such thing as too much Helen Castor, and I heartily agree with that assessment. So it's nice to see Helen Castor up there, tied with Eleanor Janega for best voice of all the many guests on this podcast. Runners up in this category were the amazing Seb Falk, and also Dan Jones, who has just a great voice. That's why he is so successful, I think, on Netflix and on History Hit and on his own podcast, which you haven't listened to, check out. Then we also have somebody who will be surprised to find out that he is nominated for this, but it is Winston Black, who is on twice talking about medieval medicine and talking about the plague and COVID-19. And Winston is just a lovely, lovely person. But I agree with you. He has a great voice when it comes to recording and listening to a podcast for 45 minutes. I could listen to Winston for sure for hours at a time. What a great voice he has. Also in this category, it's mostly people with English accents, I gotta say. We have other friends like Anne-Louise Avery. We have Mark Bailey, Howard Block, Joe Alcock, Michael Chagnon, who is one of the curators at the Aga Khan Museum, which I should mention has a new exhibit on Rumi, which people can check out here in Toronto. Amy Jeffs, who has a new book coming out, and Donna Trubinsky, who I think will also be delighted to be nominated in this category. So all of these people you thought had great voices, and I totally agree. At the top, we have Eleanor Janega, and we have Helen Castor, the best voices on the Medieval podcast. Following up closely on this category is the category Best Chemistry with Me, because I wanted to find out who you liked listening to, which conversations you really enjoyed, and are they ones that I really enjoyed too. And what is so gratifying about this category and the results that came up is that these are conversations in which I had a really awesome time. Now, I don't always read comments when they are put on social media, for example, because they can really bring you down. Some of them are hurtful. I have read a couple comments, and the criticism I tend to get is that I laugh too much. And I mean, fair. I do laugh a lot. Sometimes I laugh when I'm nervous. Mostly I laugh when I'm having a good time. And recording this podcast is one of my absolute favorite things to do. And I know in the episodes that came up on top in this category, I was laughing a lot. So I'm so glad that you are here laughing along, enjoying along with me, because it's meant to be something fun, and I'm glad it's fun for you. So at the top of this category, we have a three-way tie. Eleanor Yanaga's up there. I am not shocked by this because the two of us just nerd out whenever we get together. And I don't know if you remember my saying this, but Eleanor and I met on this podcast. So that first episode is us meeting for the first time, and we haven't actually met in person. So you get to see in real time our friendship developing and growing, and it's just so beautiful. And we have such a great time. We also have Helen Carr, who was a bit of a surprise for me at the top of this category, only because I've met Helen a total of once, and that was on this episode talking about John of Gaunt. And yeah, we had a really great conversation. And I guess you picked up on that because Helen Carr is up there as having great chemistry, which is awesome. Also, tied for the top place, the third in the top place here, is Peter Konieczny, which shouldn't be a surprise perhaps because I've known Peter for 10 years now and he lives just down the road at this point. And so we talk all the time, and I think you can hear that in our recordings together where you can hear me think, oh my goodness, Peter, at least once an episode. So tied up there with Helen Carr and Eleanor Yanaga is Peter Konieczny, my guest every week. And then right up there as a runner-up on this was Dan Jones. And I'm happy to see Dan Jones near the top of this category because Dan has been a good friend since about 2015 was when we met for the first time. And we always have a good time together and we always laugh a lot. So I'm happy to see Dan Jones near the top of this category. At the very top, though, we have a three-way tie. Helen Carr, Eleanor Yanaga, and Peter Konieczny as having the best chemistry with me on the Medieval Podcast. And we are coming near the end here. We are almost at the best episode overall. But before we get there, I had a question on the survey that was best book recommendation because I'm throwing out book titles like every week, often more than one. And I wanted to know which books you got, which books you read, which books you took out of the library. And this is a question that a lot of people skipped, probably because there are a lot of book titles and maybe it's hard to choose from them. One person did say it's too hard to choose and books are very expensive, so it's hard to get hold of them. And I totally understand that because a lot of the people I speak to on this podcast are academics. And so their books come out through academic publishing, which is a pricey market for sure. I'm hoping that if you can't get hold of them at the bookstore because they're so expensive, that maybe you can lean on your libraries close by and see if they can get hold of these copies for you, even as an ebook, because they're really great books. And I absolutely understand that many of them can be out of your price range. This is one of the reasons why a lot of the people I talk to are academics, but a whole bunch of people I talk to are also doing trade books. And that is in part because I want to make sure that you can access these trade books from people that you've heard on the podcast that you are now familiar with and that you have an idea about their style, their type of book, and what it covers. So I try and have a good balance of trade books as well because I know that they are much easier to get hold of in the libraries and at the local bookstore. Some of the other people in this category said, I don't know, they were all good, which is true. There's so many good books out there, honestly. So many books, so little time. Someone else said so many. And they did pick up a copy of The Last Duel by Eric Jagger because of the podcast. Another person says Reynard the Fox by Anne-Louise Avery, Women in the Crusades by Helen Nicholson. Someone else said Whose Middle Ages, which I didn't feature as its own podcast because this is a book, it's a compilation with something like 26 different writers, including David Perry and Geraldine Hang. And this book, the subtitle is Teachable Moments for an Ill-Used Past. So this is about inclusivity in medieval studies. So I'm really glad that somebody picked up that book because it is a really important discussion to keep having. Someone else said The Gilded Page, and I thought for a second, I don't remember recommending The Gilded Page, and found out that this is the American title, The Gilded Page, The Secret Lives of Medieval Manuscripts, for the British book, or the book that I have under the British title, Hidden Hands, The Lives of Manuscripts and Their Makers by Mary Wellesley. So I'm glad that you picked up this book. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. And so Mary Wellesley's books are just as good under any title. And then lastly, somebody said that they bought my book and they loved it. And I don't know which book you bought, but I'm super happy that you loved it. That's always so gratifying for an author to hear. And over the course of this podcast, I have put out 2 books and another one coming out in September. So that is another thing that has kind of marked the years as they go on. And I'm really glad, whoever you are, that you enjoyed that book. So here we are at the category Best Episode Overall. And I have to say, dozens of people did this survey. Almost all of them picked a different episode, which is really awesome, because I think that it shows our range of interests. It shows that we have so many different interests, and it shows that I'm hitting the sweet spot where I can have something for everybody and that we can all enjoy these episodes together. So by a margin of only 1 vote, we have a winner for the category Best Episode Overall. And it's appropriate because without this person, the Medieval Podcast would not exist, because it is Peter Konieczny's episode, Murders in Medieval London. And without Peter's support and medievalist.net support to distribute this podcast, I wouldn't have been able to create it. So it seems appropriate that the winner for Best Episode Overall is Peter Konieczny, Murders in Medieval London. And this is based on research that he did years ago. But I think it really goes to show that podcast listeners love murder, right? There is nothing like a murder to get people to listen to podcasts. Maybe we need to have more murder on this podcast. Who knows? In this category was a huge range of podcasts. We have episodes I did by myself. A Who's Who of English Kings is up there. Chrétien de Troyes is up there. The Scottish Wars of Independence with Ian McInnes is up there. Fragments with Lisa Fagan Davis. Going to Church with Nicholas Orme. We have Medieval Households with Catherine French. We have Storyland with Amy Jeffs. We have The White Ship Disaster with Charles Spencer. We have Measuring in the Middle Ages with Emanuele Lulli. We have Honey and Medicine, the sweeter side of medieval warfare with Alana Krug, Medieval Marriage with Ruth Mazo Karras, and a whole lot more. So I think that just goes to show the breadth of the knowledge of the people who have come on this podcast and the breadth of the knowledge that we all now have because of it. Across categories, Eleanor Yanniga was nominated in 6 out of the 7 possible categories for her to be in. So congrats to Eleanor again. And then right behind, in 5 of the possible categories, was Medieval Storytime Dogs. So murder, sex, and dogs, that's really the key to success in any podcasting space. Congratulations to all of the winners across categories, because it just goes to show how much people love medieval studies and love this work and love the people who are actually putting the work out there. So this brings me to the final part of this episode, which is a category I put on the survey called Any Kind Words for Danielle's Guests. So this was just an open-ended category where people could just say things that they wanted to say to my guests to make them feel good. So if you've been a guest on the Medieval Podcast, listen up, because this stuff is addressed to you. We have people saying, fine work, keep going, wonderful presentations, you're awesome, stellar, wonderful. The guests are consistently excellent. I always enjoy them. Thank you for sharing your hard-won knowledge. And another one similar, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And then it's got a swords crossing emoji and a nerd emoji, which are both super appropriate. One person says, they've all been lovely, informative, just fantastic to listen to. I've learned a lot from all of them. And I heartily agree with that. I've learned a lot from all of them too. Someone else says, keep talking. I love hearing you all talk about your fascinating research, but it costs me a fortune in books. That is fair. That is fair. They're all great. I love hearing about research direct from the researcher themselves, because you can hear their enthusiasm for the topic. And I think that is definitely true. Even the people that come on sounding nervous at the beginning, by the end of the episode, they are fully into the topic. And I love listening to people be enthusiastic, just like this person who has responded to the survey. Someone else says, Danièle has always brought on such amazing and passionate guests. She is an excellent host, and I can't wait for more episodes going forward. So whoever said that, thank you very much. I do work hard at this, and I am definitely passionate about bringing amazing guests on for you. So I'm really happy that you're enjoying the podcast. And then this last comment I found really meaningful. It says, "You're all stars and very interesting as you talk about things precious to you and keep alive the memories of those you discuss." And I really appreciate that comment because we are, I think, together, you, me, and the guests, trying to keep this time alive, trying to keep alive the memory of the people who lived before us, because I think the people on this podcast are invested in those stories of actual people. So I'm really glad to hear that this is something that speaks to you. And I really appreciate the comment and all of the comments. Thank you, everybody, for sending such nice words to all of my guests. They super deserve all of your kind words, because this is not a profession that you get into for the money. Everyone who's in it is in it because they love it. And I'm so happy to be able to pass on your comments to all of my amazing guests. And speaking of amazing guests, and one who won the category Best Overall, I invited Peter Konieczny to send in a couple of words to tell us how he feels about episode 200.
Hi, Danielle. Well, first, I want to thank you for all the nice words you just said about me. You're too kind. You've had a lot of great episodes. Perhaps the best is when I interviewed you. I did notice there was no chance to vote for the best host, but we'll let that go. But, looking back over 200 episodes, I've had a lot of favorites. I think I've loved all of them, but I was really happy that you have had a chance to talk kind of famous historians like Natalie Zeman Davis, Barbara Newman, Monica Green. And I'm really glad you had a chance to speak with Alicia McKenzie, who sadly passed away last year. It was great to have that conversation for posterity. But look, I'm looking forward to the next 200 episodes. And thanks again.
For 4 years, I have been saying thank you to everyone on Patreon. And so I'm going to say it one more time. Thank you to everyone who supports this podcast as well as other podcasts that are distributed on medievalist.net through medievalist.net's Patreon page. I hope that you are enjoying the rewards that you get there, and I am so grateful that you are continuing to fund indie historians and allow us to keep this work going. So thank you so much, and if you want to be part of all of that action, please visit patreon.com/medievalists. For everything you could ever want to know about the Middle Ages, follow medievalist.net on Facebook or Twitter at Medievalists. You can find me, Danièle Sobalski, on social media at 5MIN Medievalist or 5-Minute Medievalist. And you can find my books at your favorite bookstores, where you can get hold of How to Live Like a Monk, Medieval Wisdom for Modern Life, in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. And you can even pre-order my new book, Chivalry and Courtesy, Medieval Manners for a Modern World, which is coming out in September. Our music is Beyond the Warriors by Guy Frog. Thanks for listening to 200 episodes, and have yourself an awesome day.